Bending, can you show your friend on Breaking Bad?
Sorry,
Breaking
today,
Fast.
No, it would not be like yesterday when it was really, really hot. Sorry. When you're wearing this uniform, you want it pretty cool, I've got to be honest. Do you know what, ladies and gentlemen? Earlier this week, we had a gun salute on the wharf here on Tuesday. Duke of Edinburgh's birthday, ladies and gentlemen. Lovely day out. By the way, Duke of Edinburgh is the Queen's husband. So every year on his birthday, we have a 62 gun salute out here. I was stood out there, ladies and gentlemen, dressed like this, and a gentleman came up to me and said, "What's going on?" I said, 62 gun salutes for Duke of Edinburgh. He goes, "How often do you do it?" And I'll tell you what, I said to the supervisor, "I'll tell you what, we should do this annually." Anyway, ladies, right, so we haven't quite got that one. Come on. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we've now made our way through the Byward Tower. We are now standing in the outer ward or outer bailey of the Tower of London, the area between the inner and outer defensive walls. The road running between the two here is known as Mint Street. It's called Mint Street because this is where all the coins of the realm were designed and minted up until the year 1810. In fact, just there, they have an exhibition about the time of the Royal Mint was here at the Tower of London. The windows upstairs, incidentally, that used to be the offices and accommodation for Sir Isaac Newton when he's here at the Tower of London as Master of the Mint. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the very man who invented gravity living here at the Tower of London. Another great British invention still used to this day. That's where the British used to make things, isn't it? So nowadays we just sell our houses. Oh, unless you're from Yorkshire, of course. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when you become a yeoman warder here at the Tower of London, we also have to live here. We live in the Tower of London, so I'm not looking quite as bad now, am I? I've gone from stinky old man to house in London. It's worth noting, ladies, I'm always on the lookout for the future. Now, we most of us live here in the outside walls of the Tower of London, although some of my colleagues also live in some of the towers. The Beauchamp Tower here to my right, and beyond that, the Devereux Tower. Some of my colleagues, he's got a very funny shaped living room, I have to say though. Anyway, moving down the outside walls, one of my colleagues also lives in the Byward Tower. Now the Byward Tower is called the Byward Tower because it stands by the outer ward of the Tower of London. Now all of the towers and some of the other buildings, all 20 of them, and as I say, some of the other buildings, were used at some stage to house prisoners. So all of the towers have a history when it comes to prisoners. The most notable prisoners held within the Byward Tower were Lords Kilmarnock and Balmerino. They participated in the second but also failed Jacobite Rebellion of 1745, led by Bonnie Prince Charlie. Ladies and gentlemen, they made their way from that tower and up to Tower Hill in 1746 to lose their heads to block and axe. Now their good friend Simon Fraser, also brought to the Tower of London, was taken from the Tower of London up to Tower Hill in 1747. He was the last man beheaded in England as a form of execution. Actually, the Scottish had so many rebellions, we only count the ones that actually crossed the border. So we had 5 last week. Now, moving round to the left, you can see the Byward Post Stand or Sally's Fort. Now, in the days when London had little more than rough and even track, royalty, important people, would travel by the River Thames. They'd moor their royal barge at the side of that wall, cross over a small drawbridge and make their entry to the tower via the archway. On the 29th of May, 1533, Henry VIII stood there, awaiting the arrival of his second wife, Anne Boleyn. She was coming here to the tower in preparation for her coronation on the 1st of June. As Anne steps into the archway, Henry VIII steps forward, embracing his new wife, then apparently promising to love her for the rest of her life. Easy for him to say, really, isn't it? Anyway, but it was for the rest of her life, anyway, because 3 years later, Anne returns to the tower via a very different gateway and obviously very different reasons. You feel quite sorry for Henry VIII, it didn't happen quite as often, wouldn't you? Anyway, moving round behind me now, we can see the Bell Tower. Now the Bell Tower, ladies and gentlemen, was built around 1190 during the reign of Richard I, Richard the Lionheart. It's called the Bell Tower because on top there is a belfry. Within that belfry, the oldest surviving curfew bell in the City of London. The bell dates from 1651. The bell would generally be rung as a warning. When it was rung, gates would be closed, defences manned. But it was also rung 1 hour before every execution. Now the bell tower, ladies and gentlemen, is the oldest and strongest surviving here of the 13 towers that make up the inner defensive wall. It comprises of 2 chambers, one on top of the other. They're both used at one stage to house many famous prisoners. The most notable prisoners held in the bell tower, in the lower chamber, Sir Thomas More, the Lord Chancellor. At the same time, in the upper chamber, his good friend John Fisher, the Bishop of Rochester. Both men incarcerated here at the Tower of London by Henry VIII for refusing to recognise Henry as head of the Church of England. Both men made the way from this tower and up to Tower Hill in 1535. One in June and one in July, to have their heads removed from their bodies. Both of these men now lie at rest within the Chapel Royal of St Peter ad Vincula, although their heads lie at rest elsewhere. Both men canonised as saints in 1935 by the Roman Catholic Church. Also kept to the bell tower, but in the upper chamber, was a man called James Scott. He was the Duke of Monmouth, ladies and gentlemen. Now today is the Queen's official birthday, isn't it? And we're going to have Troop in the Colour. And when you see Troop in the Colour, there'll be a group of soldiers sat at the back who were wearing red tunics and they're riding horses. Lucky boys, eh? Anyway, they are called the Lifeguards. And because they were formed by Charles II, a member of the Lifeguards has to be with the royal family at all times. And he is known as the Gold Stick. And James Scott, the Duke of Monmouth, was the first Gold Stick of the Lifeguards. Isn't that interesting? But he was also, ladies and gentlemen, the eldest of 12 to 15 illegitimate children fathered by Charles II. A very happy king indeed, I would say. Now, when Charles II dies in 1685, he leaves no heir to the British throne. He'd had lots of children, but none with his wife. So the throne of England passes to his younger brother, James the Duke of York, who was then 1685 crowned James II, ladies and gentlemen. James II, though, was a Catholic. We didn't like Catholics very much in this country at that time. So James Scott, the Duke of Monmouth, raised an army populated by popular Protestant support in what became known as the Pitchfork or Monmouth Rebellion. It all ends very badly for him at the Battle of Sedgemoor in Somerset. Defeated, by the way, by his own regiment, the first battle honour of Lifeguards. Yes, the Battle of Sedgemoor in Somerset. Now, he initially goes on the run for the battlefield, but he was eventually captured, having already been sentenced to death by a man called Judge Jeffreys. All he had to do was come here to the tower, spend 3 days and 2 nights in the upper part of this tower before he made his way up to Tower Hill. Yes, he was. His executioner that day, ladies and gentlemen, was a man called Jack Ketch. Jack, a very famous executioner of the 17th century. Well, not so much famous, I might add, though, infamous. Well, Jack generally botched executions up because when he beheaded people, he was generally very, very drunk. Nobody was disappointed that day, for after between 5 and 7 blows of the axe from Jack, Monmouth's head was still attached to his body, although not quite as firmly as when Jack had started. At this stage, under derision from the crowd, in a fit of rage, Jack throws down the axe and pulls out from behind his back his far sharper and at this stage more reliable butcher's knife. By trade, Jack was a full-time butcher, ladies and gentlemen. Then again, to the consternation of the crowd, he continues to cut Monmouth's head off by hand. By the way, the beef sandwiches and tongue sandwiches in the cafeteria today are strangely expensive, and the vegetarian option, well, let's just say that's very, very expensive. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you think that'd be the end of the story. Well, it was for Monmouth, but the story of his body continued. It was at this stage where Monmouth's family came forward. We'd like a painting of him now, please. No! So the head and the body were returned to the Tower of London, where the head was sewn back onto the body by the Tower surgeon. Yes, it was too late to save me. I'll keep getting asked. The painting was then made of Monmouth, said to be a good likeness of him, although slightly pale. Monmouth now, ladies and gentlemen, has the dubious distinction of being one of the few people buried within the Chapel Royal of St Peter ad Vincula, with his head attached, albeit detailed several hours prior to that, ladies and gentlemen. Now, that's a terrible way to die. Personally, ladies and gentlemen, if I was to die, I'd like to die quietly in my sleep like my grandfather. Definitely not like the people in the car he was driving at the time, which must have been terrifying. Now, ladies and gentlemen, he stood up for a tour of the Tower of London.
Yes!
Are you sure?
Yes!
Let's must be heading down to Traitors' Gate. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm in Pride Reserve.